There's no shame in wishing you were a Viking. We could all do with a little looting and pillaging every so often to relieve some stress. It's just human nature. But even if you're a fan of the TV show Vikings, you probably don't know what you'd be in for. And you're not alone. Even though the Vikings left behind things like settlements and artifacts, they didn't leave much in the way of writing, except for their sagas. Even if you look at what others wrote about them, it's a lot of hearsay and exaggeration. But don't worry, we do know some things for sure, and it's just as messed up as you'd expect. Criminal profiling to cope with Vikings at home. So, you're a Viking. You make your living pillaging, raiding, and kidnapping. You're really good at sailing the high seas, and you're even better at cleaving skulls. But you have to go home sometime. So what happens then? Do you turn off the bloodthirsty?
More wine! More women! More table!
That's where criminal profiling comes in. Dr. Taryn Wills of the University of Aberdeen says the return of the Viking horde created such a problem on the home front that Icelandic sagas were written, in part, to warn homegrown Vikings. There are a lot of physical descriptions in the sagas, which is a bit out of place among other contemporary pieces of strictly plot-based literature. Descriptions of heavy eyebrows and giant beards had to serve another purpose, and Wills believes it's documentation of the testosterone-fueled physical features of the men who caused the most trouble at home. It was their way of linking physiology with personality. And this early type of criminal profiling was pretty practical. Audiences got a great story and learned to be on the lookout for guys with bushy beards and broad shoulders. They were the looters, the pillagers, and the ones to be very, very careful around. Trimming the fingernails of the dead. This one's going to get gross pretty fast, so buckle up. According to Snorri Sturluson's Icelandic saga The Prose Edda, part of the Viking funeral rites involved a step thought to be a necessary part of preventing or at least postponing the end of the world: cutting the fingernails and toenails of the dead. There are all kinds of dark things that were said to happen during Ragnarok, and one of those horrible little details includes the sailing of the ship Naglfir. Naglfir would carry the giants into battle, and the entire ship was made from the fingernails and toenails of the dead. The more people who were buried with untrimmed nails, the bigger the ship would be. Bigger ship equals more giants on board. And honestly, we want more giants about as much as we want to see a giant ship made from toenails. Teeth filing was a status symbol. You can see all kinds of body modifications on the market today, but the Vikings had their own ideas about it. Anthropologist Caroline Arsini examined 557 Viking skeletons and found that there were 24 of them that had a series of horizontal lines filed into their teeth. Going to the dentist today is bad enough, so just imagine taking sharp objects to your teeth and filing away. No one's sure just why they decided to do this particular horrible thing, but William Fitzhugh of the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History thinks they might have gotten the idea after making contact with West African or Native American peoples. Wherever they got the idea, the practice is so precisely done, anthropologists believe it took some serious professional level skill to do it right. Maybe just ask for a touch-up next time the dentist starts scraping away. Monasteries were raided for eunuchs. The Vikings definitely didn't invent slavery, but they did take it to a whole new level. Let's take Ireland. Some of Ireland's largest cities, including Dublin and Limerick, began life as hubs for the Viking slave trade. They stayed that way for hundreds of years. And what's more, Vikings targeted monasteries in particular not because they were looking for riches or hated Christianity, but because they knew they could kidnap literate men who would be castrated and sold off as eunuchs. Historian Mary Valente says there was a huge demand for literate eunuchs in the slave trade, mostly from the Middle East and Byzantium. There, eunuchs would be put to work as teachers, harem guards, in various governmental roles, or as palace servants. Viking raiders saw monasteries as a pretty literal gold mine, and once their slaves entered their trade network, they'd be shipped off to places like Venice to be castrated and sold. Puts all that raiding in a whole different light. Viking berserkers were very real. The idea of the Viking berserker is so insane they firmly entrenched themselves in the realm of fantasy character classes. But they were real people who would go hardcore badass on the enemy, so dangerous that even other Vikings gave them a wide berth. Our image of berserkers goes back to the sagas written by Snorri Sturluson, and thanks to him, we know they were used in battle only after people thought very, very carefully about it. It was such a risk because they could be just as dangerous to their own side, and in 1030, Olav Haraldsson found that out the hard way. His berserkers completely failed to follow orders, lost the battle, and kickstarted the king's ultimate downfall. Oops. No one really knows where berserker rage came from, and it's such a powerful thing it's usually attributed to Odin's influence. Skeptoid's Brian Dunning has another pretty dark, pretty heartbreaking theory. He suggests their supernatural rage and anger, triggered on the battlefield, falls at the extreme end of post-traumatic stress. Other descriptions of berserkers include suffering from an almost seizure-like episode before the rage, a long depression afterward, and a dissociative episode of uncontrollable anger. Berserkers weren't always raging, but when they were, perhaps it was because of severe PTSD. Thanks for watching. Click the grunge icon to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Plus, check out all this cool stuff we know you'll love too.